Have you ever heard this? When are you going to get married? Who do you think you'll marry? When are you going to have kids? You're going to be a great parent one day. Or maybe you'd be a great parent, so hurry up and give me grandbabies. Or when you were younger in high school and before, you probably heard, when you have kids, what will you name them? Or when you get married, what will you look for in a partner? And here's the thing. Usually people more or less assume that we are going to marry and have kids. And sometimes we ourselves assume that. So welcome back to Unfolding Wings, that podcast made by and for faithful young adults trying to navigate a rapidly changing and confusing world to become truly themselves, truly the people God created them to be. I am the host and pastor of Charlton City UMC, along with my co-hosts. I have one of them here with me, Diego. Say hello.
Hello.
He is also a young adult from CCUMC, and we, of course, don't necessarily represent the church or its views, but we do hope to give voice and space to your questions, hopes, and dreams to let you know that it is okay to be listening to the voice of God in your heart and not just obeying what everyone has always told us. And we also have with us today a guest from the way back when. Now, I never know what the most respectful thing to say is. Elder, older person, someone from a previous generation. So we're just going to go with from the way back when. So we have with us Nancy. Say hello, Nancy.
Hello.
All right, it's great to have you with us. And today, of course, we are talking about marriage. And my wife wants to make sure I say this for all of you in the know. Marriage. Marriage is what brings us together today. All right, so anyway, marriage. What's the point? What's it for? We'll get to the good stuff in a second, but first let me point out that one of our first episodes on this podcast was dating. And as we reflected on the relationship that we might find between that episode and this episode, we first of all thought that when it comes to dating, many Christians might find that there are lots of rules around dating. Can you have sex before marriage? When is dating okay? Who you should date, etc. Whereas with marriage, there are perhaps more expectations to fulfill. Like getting married, having kids, that sort of thing. What do you guys think? Am I super clever and onto something? Dating is about rules, marriage about expectations, or am I just spouting words? What do you think? Don't speak at once. You can just say I'm an idiot. That's fine.
It's certainly been a long time since I've been dating. I don't know if things change just because I'm the elder person and it was many, many years ago. I remember dating, and to me, dating was a fun time. I guess, well, I had a few boyfriends, and of course, I thought I was going to marry each and every one of them when I was young, but I soon found out that that's not really how it works. So I have been married twice. My first husband died of cancer when I was 30 years old. So I've been married a good portion of my life. I will say, as far as the getting married, definitely the second time I got married, I was a little older. And I would definitely say it was for love and companionship. Unconditional love and companionship. And so we just worked many, many years to achieve those goals, because it doesn't just happen. You have to work at it.
Yeah, that's great to hear. We'll come back to that. What is marriage for, and is every marriage right about that? Sometimes you might learn from mistakes. But yeah, so it was only just a few years ago that you were into dating, but Diego is a little bit closer to it. What do you think, Diego? What is the relationship there between dating and marriage?
Ooh, okay. So I stopped dating about 7 years ago when I met Alita. So for me, it's been a while as well. Uh, um, I think that for me, has always dating has always been something about trying to get to know the person, or like trying to see how much compatibility and how much fun you can have with that person. Um, I think marriage is more of you want to live your life, but keep living your life and make your choices, and those choices include that person. So I think that's the biggest difference between marriage and dating. Marriage, you start making choices as, I don't want to say as one, but like that choices that could affect two people. So you start putting other people, also, like, well, maybe I can't take this job because it would affect this other person, and we're both together on this, and we're both kind of going on this path together. Well, dating, it's more like, I have to go. We'll see if, how we're gonna date long distance, and this is just one of the many differences. But I think that that's one of the biggest difference.
Well, you're onto something there. I mean, the Bible does say that once you're married, you become one flesh, right? That you don't have the same flexibility or independence, even that you are still yourself, of course, but you are no longer just yourself. Um, I I share with Nancy the idea that when I was dating, uh, I always thought that I would marry the person that I was dating, or I was thinking about, can I marry this person? And and reflecting on that, I see and I hear as well a lot of young people who seem desperate to date and marry. They seem to go from one relationship immediately to the next, as if there's some necessity there to be with someone and to get towards marriage. And I wonder if there's any thought that goes into that. Why are they doing it? Is it right? Is it the right person or whatever? And I wonder if it's related to some of the expectations that we place on ourselves or on others in our culture. And so many of the intro questions, the intro to this episode, um, a lot of questions, right? Expectation questions. When are you going to get married? When are you going to have kids? Have you heard those questions and felt those expectations? And if so, how have you managed?
Well, I will say that I don't ever remember those questions personally myself.
That's great. Good. Now, question I wanted to ask you in particular, Nancy, and as the person from the way back when, not because I think you do this, but have you noticed yourself placing expectations on your kids and such, about getting married or having kids or anything like that?
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. I mean, I haven't shared it with my kids, but I certainly have had those feelings and I've had those conversations with my husband. But yes, definitely so.
But you've kept it to yourself,
I
essentially.
have.
Yeah.
I
And
because
before I come,
excuse me.
well, excuse me. Before I come back to Diego and ask if he's heard these expectations and felt them, I just wonder why why you've kept those expectations to yourself.
Because I don't think that it is my business. Um, it would be, now we're talking more my grandchildren because my grandchildren are all grown up and certainly of dating age and some of marrying age. But I think it's a personal choice for a couple, whether they, get married, whether they have children. I love the little kids, so yeah, I would love them to have children, but they have their own thoughts about those issues, and to me, that's kind of the person.
So It's kind of a leading question. I was hoping you would say exactly that for our young adult listeners to hear that, because if there are expectations placed on us, and sometimes our parents or whoever, they don't even realize that that's what they're doing. But to be able to, for us to be able to say, if not out loud, at least in our heads, that's none of their business. I will make my own choices. I think it's good to hear an elder from the way back when to say that as well, to give voice to the fact that yeah, it is a personal choice. So Diego, because you've and I don't want to place an expectation upon you right here and now, but you and Alita have been together for a while, so I am betting that you have heard something like that of when are you guys going to get married, and if so, how have you managed with that?
So the great thing about having ADHD is that you forget very quickly what people ask you. So I don't really remember uh, specifics. I know that maybe having my family so far away, like the only people that are here in the States is my mom, my dad, and my sister. My mom and my sister have never like brought that up. My mom have always been like, it's your guys' own journey throughout. Doesn't matter what happens. And my dad, he's just a sucker for like little babies, so he just keeps asking me and my sister when he's gonna have like little grandkids, but never. It's more like a something fun that we like. He says, but not like an expectation. Um, so I haven't. I think I'm the bad person to ask about that. I think if I have heard it, sometimes when questions get at like when things like that get said to me that I feel like I have no answer to, or just I don't really want to answer at this point, because I feel like with marriage and having kids, a lot more expectations fall into if it's a marriage between a woman and a man. It falls into the woman, because she's the one like sometimes answering more of those questions than me. But yeah, so I haven't been asked that, but I know that um like thinking about back um like when my parents got married and all that stuff, they got married a lot younger than me and stuff like that. So I'm sure that back home in Peru, my aunts and uncles have been asking that question, just haven't told me.
And you bring up a good point that we can't verify without Kayla here with us, that men and women in relationships nowadays might have different experiences. And sometimes it's not necessarily our parents or our elders in the family, but just our friends, our peers, and things. Not that they can place expectations upon us, but they might say things that just make us feel like it's none of your business, and oh, we've gotten married, so now we can have kids around the same age, and so let's do that. And it's just we'll have kids when we want to have kids, if we want to have kids. Like, don't start imagining that we're gonna all have kids together. But it's good to hear. Um, for our listeners, hopefully we have many thousands, but it's good to hear that there uh, are people out there and there are ways out there to kind of push those expectations and comments out of our minds and out of our hearts. Now we're going to get to kind of the what fors. What is marriage for? And before we do, I just want to say that a lot of what we talk about today probably has connotations on how we view gay marriage as well. We're not actually going to go there today, but consider my mentioning it as a possible wink wink. And I have to say wink wink out loud, of course, because you can't see my precious brown eyes winking. But I have to mention it too, because in my prayerful discernment on whether gay marriage might be acceptable, just personally, I realized that for me, I think the question we should be asking is not, is marriage only between a man and a woman, but rather, what in the world is marriage for in the first place? What is the purpose of marriage? Why should anyone get married? And I think our answers to those questions will have implications for how our theology on gay marriage develops. But again, having wink winked, we won't go there in this episode, and we probably won't go there for a number of episodes more. Um, so I have some biblical stuff to share, but why don't you guys go ahead and answer those questions, beginning with what is the purpose of marriage?
My purpose of marriage, I think the biggest purpose is companionship. Someone to, and of course that comes with the love piece, but someone who shares your views, someone that's there through the good times and the bad times, just someone that you respect, but definitely someone that you choose to spend the rest of your life. And when I entered into my marriage 43 years ago, that is what I said, that I will spend the rest of my life with this man. And it has been a good life. But I do say companionship, which comes with a lot of little, well, like communications and, but well, let's just go back to the companionship. It's someone to spend your time with, someone that you care enough about to spend your life with.
Yeah. So you're getting ahead of some of my Bible stuff, but which is great, you're a theologian already. And so I want to come back to and ask you a question, Nancy, but first, so Diego, when you get married, because I'm assuming now, what for you is the purpose of that?
Well, Pastor, as you know, medical insurance is very expensive. And no, I'm just kidding. Well, apart, I mean, there is some, in our society, there is some legal connotations of, when it comes to be medical insurance or will or medical decision making, for either partner. So I think that's very important. I think that I agree with Nancy. I think that when I think of marriage, is kind of like this union to be able to be partners, to kind of have this companionship that throughout your life. I think that there's obviously there's also the question, I'm pretty sure we'll get there later, but like, do we need marriage for that as well? Because that's a different question. But if we're talking about if people that want to get married, what's the purpose of marriage? As what is when you get married, I think is to form this partnership, because times can be tough. I mean, you get some pretty good highs, but some lows in life just in general. And I think sometimes without that person next to you, it can be very, very, very hard. I had a friend, and I don't know if I agree 100% completely with him, but he used to tell me that marriage is sometimes, so when you seem like to be falling out of love, there's sometime, like this thing where you can fall back in love, to keep you there, fall back in love. I don't know if I agree completely with that, but I do agree the fact that it kind of helps you, it gives you pause so you can kind of like work hard on your relationship. And I know for some people, they don't need the title of being married, and I think that's to them, that's great. But the people that do like that title being of marriage, I think that is important to them for that.
Yeah, and you brought up the kind of the legal consequences and implications and things like that. It makes it harder once you're married to not be married. So you do kind of have bumper guards, whether or not they help you fall back in love or not. It certainly is easier to save the relationship with the legal marriage than otherwise. But that is an interesting question. I'm not sure we will get to it, but yeah, if it's all about companionship, um, why not just a friend? What? Why do you need to be married? Um, well, and maybe we'll just go ahead and talk about that. But first, I want to ask, because Nancy, you had said um, earlier that with your second marriage, that it was all about companionship. Now, I don't want to read between the lines, but did you learn something from the first, and did your perspective change about what marriage is really for from the first to the second marriage?
I think so.
Yeah.
Because I was very young when when I got married the first time, and I had children quite young. So both the marriages are completely different. Um, I, I, I guess with age comes a lot of knowledge, and I think when you're too young, and I was probably too young, there's a lot of things that seem to get in your way. And I think as you get older and more understanding, a little more patience, you view things a lot differently. I don't say I had a bad marriage the first time, but in comparison, first of all, I didn't know God very well the first time. That has changed my life entirely. I know that's probably another topic, another day, but so my way of thinking is very, very different now than it was back then. And of course, had to concentrate much more on children. So did I get married for companionship? I think sometimes I got married because wasn't that the thing to do? Is that what your friends were doing? So I don't really think that it was for the right reasons, as it has been the second.
I appreciate your admitting that might perhaps have been part of the reason the first time around. Because I think, well, as I was saying earlier, I think a lot of people, a lot of young people, do. I mean, it's the next thing to do. You've been with someone for a while, we get married, and then same with having kids. Once you've been married for a little bit, that's the next thing to do, and we perhaps don't always put as much thoughtfulness into the decisions and choices that we make. And if we could have the wisdom of 20 years of experience to look back on now, that would be great. But oftentimes we don't have that, and then we don't listen to anyone who has wisdom to share. But hopefully people will listen to us now. And I think perhaps it is a good question to just tackle for a little bit. If companionship is the main reason for us anyway that we're talking of marriage, what is it about marriage that brings about the companionship in a way that other forms of companionship don't, right? Like a friend or someone that we are intimate with, but we just never marry. What is it about marriage? Why do we need marriage?
Marriage is a commitment, first of all. People live together. I have members of my family that are doing that. And I accept it for them, not for me. I think that there is no real commitment there.
Without marriage, you mean?
Some people say, well, it's just a piece of paper. Well, maybe that is what it is to them, but it's not, it's nothing to do with the piece of paper to me. It's a commitment. It's a vow that you take, that you are going to love and honor this person for better, for worse, richer or poorer, and all those things. And when you say them, you have to mean them. And so when I went into this marriage, this relationship, that was a commitment that I made and intend to keep. I think, at least the people that I know, the young people nowadays are waiting till they're a little bit older to get married, which I think is a good thing. I think they can be, maybe they're established in their career. They know what direction they want to go. Me, the first time around, I didn't know. I didn't have a direction. So I think that's important, and I think that's why the young people today, are smart in that regard, that they are waiting until hopefully the time is right for them. But you say about the companionship, why then wouldn't it just be a friend? But this type of companionship goes deeper than even the best friendship. Maybe companionship isn't the best word. Maybe there's a better word for it.
Go with marital or intimate companionship. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. What about you, Diego? What is marriage about?
Yeah, so I think that I mean the biggest difference between being a friend or not, I guess, is that you're attracted to that person in a way or another. I think that you could have people with you throughout your life that are friends or not, that are with you through the bads and good as well, but sometimes you can't make quite those same like choices that you have to make sometimes, like moving from a different state, or like buying a house together or anything like that. And I'm talking right now, like, I guess, like in the society we live in, where we have to do those kind of choices. um I I think that also, like, I maybe to me, marriage is a little bit different than for other people when it comes to like what marriage is, because like I have family members that oh, like my mom, for example, that call themselves being married but never have gone through the process, I guess, with their current partners. So I think that it's marriage can have a definition, very vast definition, and sometimes those definitions are not wrong or right. It's just definition for each person, and some people choose not to get married, either because they want to kind of like keep their finances separate, or or kind of protect themselves from that instance, or just because it's really expensive to get married in a way, because the expectations of the wedding. But I think more and more those things have been shedding in a way, because people have been doing a little more, like, at least in my generation, doing the elopements, which cost a lot less than a wedding. Um, I think that it's so weird, because I mean, if you think about marriage, it used to be like into, like, I think at like 1100s, it used to be you didn't need a priest, you didn't need a civil union, you could just say, I'm married to this person. Obviously, depending on where you're from, where you were from, like, there's different customs to it, but most of the time it wasn't as what we see today. So I think for everybody, it's just very different of what marriage is. And I think, yeah, that's like a whole different question of what if marriage, if somebody says like to us we're married, even if they didn't go through the symbolic part of the wedding, is that the same thing as, you know, being married with the wedding as well? Because you know, it goes through like a legal standpoint and also a spiritual standpoint and a customs kind of standpoint and where you come from.
Yeah, and yeah, and you kind of implied it there that there's um perhaps a difference. Well, not perhaps, but there is a difference between the legal action of marriage and the spiritual action of marriage. And there was a time when the two were not connected. Nowadays they are in many times, right? If I do a wedding, I am the representative of the state at the same time. Do I want to be? It doesn't matter. I just am. Um, and for listeners out there, my kids are currently hopping all around, being quiet though, so that's good. Um, and uh, what was I even saying? Oh yeah, but you know, uh, can someone be married and have those spiritual vows and that spiritual commitment, that commitment that Nancy was talking about, without the paper saying we did this thing? We are officially, legally, by the state, married. Um, and it sounds to me, Diego, like you were saying that yes, someone can be like spiritually married and have that commitment to one another without necessarily having done the state legal requirements.
Yeah, and I think I mean Nancy does drive a good point when it comes to, you know, going through the wedding portion of it. I think it's very important for some people to go to do it, and I think that we can't take away also to try to give some validation to also the people that don't go through it. Like we can't take away that what that means for in some customs, what that means to some, like it. And I think that's why marriage is such a, in a way, intimate thing between two people or more depending where you're from, but it's just an intimate thing between people. And I think that that's the big part of it, of like what's important and what marriage is and what is the purpose of it. I think it all boils down to the people in that marriage, nobody else but the people in that marriage, and that's the most important thing.
And both of you have essentially said that, and even as Nancy was saying, it's not for her to be married without the trappings of marriage, I guess you could say. Both of you have said that it's between it's between the two people in the marriage, in the relationship. So I suppose intimate companionship is probably the right phrase for us to really describe what we're talking about. And I appreciate the mention about the cost of weddings. Just as a side note, I'd like to say, please, people, stop like going to Florida and making all your friends and your family go to Florida or the Bermuda and the Bahamas. You know, gosh, it's expensive. So and when you're 30 something, you're going to all these different weddings, you're dishing out $1,000 for each thing. Like, geez, my goodness. So anyway, let's get to the Bible stuff. And you both of you have kind of already said one of the pieces that I'll say. I'll just talk for a little bit though. So some folk will point to Genesis chapter 1 as their evidence of what marriage is about, and it's about procreation to them, because God said to the first humans, to Adam and Eve, to go forth and multiply. And that's fine, I guess, but I will point out that even ancient rabbis argued that God only meant that for the very beginning, when the earth was empty, and God didn't mean it forever and ever. Um, partly because that would mean that God only cares about you as a child factory. And for you ladies out there, once you hit menopause, God doesn't care about you no more. That's the implication of that theology anyway. So I would highly recommend you don't have that theology. But then we have Genesis chapter 2, the second creation story, and that's where we get the one flesh language, that what God brings together cannot be separated. And pay attention that in Genesis 2, God only creates Adam, the male, and then thinks Adam should have a companion in life. God creates the animals for Adam, thinking that they'll make great companions. And it's only as a last resort that he takes one of Adam's ribs and makes Eve. So if marriage is about having sex, then what was God thinking with all the animals? In that sense, it's really about companionship, as the two of you have already said. And we see that a lot in the New Testament as well. And first of all, Christ talks against divorce, but rarely in favor of marriage. In fact, I don't think he ever speaks in favor of marriage, as in people should get married. He even says that in heaven, no one is given in marriage, so we shouldn't even be talking about it. And Paul says he wishes no one got married. Every Christian should be like him, single and wholly devoted to Christ. And he says that the only exception is if someone has so much lust that they would be a danger to their own souls and the holiness of others if they tried being single. So he says it's better to marry and have a sex partner, essentially, than ruin yourself in libertine living. But the reason really he's saying that is that, because he also says if you're married, you should try and not have sex as often as possible. And the underlying reason for all of this is that so you can focus on Christ, so you can grow in Christ. And he says the relationship between the married couple should be about growing in holiness and the love of Christ. And so it's very similar to, slightly different than, but very similar to the idea of companionship, that you're walking on this journey together. Just Paul adds it's not just walking through life together, but it's walking towards Christ together. And kind of related to Nancy saying that knowing God well affects not only you individually, but affects your relationships as well, and can help have a healthy marriage. So that's essentially what Paul would say. Now, all of these ideas are found in the Bible, and especially between the procreation and the companionship, I don't know that there's any honest way to try and reconcile all of the different ideas of the purposes of marriage together. I think it's better to say there are different ideas about marriage found in the Bible. All are valid, none are wrong. Would you guys agree with that? That the Bible gives us different ways of looking at marriage, and essentially we can choose which one we prefer?
Well, first, I think that Paul definitely could have helped him to go to therapy sometimes when I hear some of his passages. But
True enough.
sorry. I I think sometimes I don't know if all are valid and all are wrong, or none are wrong. I think that there is more examples in the Bible of being a good person, I think, and some examples of marriages themselves, or relationships themselves in the Bible, that kind of show you either how not to be or how to be in a relationship, or just to other people. I have, tell the truth, as somebody that's never been married and whose only long-term relationship has been with one person, I'm not sure if any of these things have any validity in a marriage. And that's why I wanted to go first, because I feel like I have not much experience to talk about.
well, not being experienced in the ways of marriage is partially a good thing, and also it's good for because many of our listeners, I imagine, and again, hopefully we have thousands, um, will not have been married and will hopefully want to know about how to faithfully think about marriage. So I think it's also good to have perspective of someone who hasn't been married. But what about you, Nancy? What do these different ideas about marriage in the Bible mean to you, if anything?
Well, they're exactly different ideas. Um, it's like take your pick. It's a little difficult to understand. It's it's an individual's own thoughts of marriage. I don't take away anything from that, to tell you the truth. I just don't. That's being honest. I don't. Because what is it, just exactly what is it telling us? To be married, to not to be married? I have to agree with Diego. Being a good, what we feel, if we feel we're being a good Christian person, I think that's probably the most I can get out of it is nothing to do with marriage. One person says should be married only if, a person says you should not be married, to devote all your time to Christ and praying. I think we have to find a happy medium there. And I think each person has to do what's right for them as an individual.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. And again, I think it'll be good for our listeners to hear to hear people say honestly, like, what the F is the Bible trying to tell us? And what I didn't say, actually, I just had a premarital counseling session today with a couple, and we read the whole of, or almost the whole of First Corinthians chapter 7, which includes some of what Paul says about, I wish everyone would be single, but if you can't be single, it's really just so that you don't go around having affairs left and right. He also says in there, there's the couple of verses about saving your spouse, essentially, and Christians have used those throughout the centuries to more or less convince people to stay in abusive relationships. Right? That, look, if you stay in this abusive relationship, who knows, you might save your spouse and bring him to Christ. So you've got to stay in the marriage. And I don't think that's what Paul meant. And it's one of those things that if Paul did mean it, I don't want anything to do with it, because if the goal is to be loving and be Christ-like, I don't think Christ would have wanted us to just be miserable and be abused all the time, even though he did sacrifice himself. That was a single moment in time, essentially, so that we wouldn't have to all of the time. And so it is hard. It is hard for people to read the Bible, especially about marriage, because there's not much in there actually, and try to figure out what we're supposed to do and what we're supposed to think about marriage. In fact, the stuff that there is about marriage in there is usually bad. I mean, Abraham and Sarah and Hagar, so this is June 25th. The lectionary reading today from Genesis was about Sarah not liking Hagar and kicking her out of the family, and then Hagar and her son have nowhere to go, and she leaves her son to die. That's not great. But that's marriage. And then there's David and Bathsheba, stealing another man's wife and then killing him so that he can have Bathsheba. So we don't have a whole lot of great models of marriage or a lot of great sayings about marriage in the Bible. I do think perhaps what we can get is, I would agree with both of you. Essentially, it's just how do we be as much like Christ as possible, and hopefully that's what marriage does for us. Hopefully that's part of it. Right, is that we are with someone um, that we can mutually grow together with. But I hope that we, just in going over the different ideas about marriage that's found in the Bible, can see how our understanding of marriage, like theologically or biblically or whatever, would affect how we approach marriage, right? If you think, if you take Genesis 1 seriously, that's the idea of marriage, to be fruitful and multiply, then that's going to be the point of marriage, right? Is having kids. If you think it's more about companionship, then having kids won't be very important. And so that's my advice to people, and I don't know if you agree, is work out your theology and your understanding of marriage as much as you can beforehand. And getting married, it's like having kids. It changes you in ways you can't predict. And maybe you'd agree with that, Nancy. I'm certainly not the same man I was when I married Danielle 9 years ago. But it helps working that stuff out ahead of time so that you can communicate with your future spouse and your current spouse and all of that about, I think we should be going at it like this because this is how I understand marriage, rather than higgledy-piggledy, just trying to throw things at the wall and hoping that something works. Does that all make sense? Getting
I
a
forgot
nod.
this is a podcast and I was nodding. I
Yeah,
was
you
like, yeah,
can't
it makes
nod.
sense. It's like people are not gonna see me. Yeah. I think it makes sense. I think bring good, point about um, people using, I mean, like always, people have used the Bible or any kind of religious text really into their own kind of selfish ways, and like kind of keeping people in abusive relationship, usually being the woman being in an abusive relationship with a man, and that still happens even without marriage. I think that's, unfortunately, that's something that does happen. So I think that um, I agree with saying that there's different ways that you can see it, and I think that it does, like you say, I think that it does change people once they get married, their perspective of marriage. Because I feel like, when, for me at least, I know that when I talk to a lot of friends, when they think about marriage, is about the wedding day, the wedding itself, and those first few months or those first few years when you're building that home. And obviously you can do that without getting married, but on this, as we're talking about marriage, I'm bringing that up. But I think that there is way more than that. There's more days where there's more days where I think, when it comes to marriage, there's more days where you're not building something up, and when you're not going through struggles, or when you're not going through the highs in life. And the same thing when you're a parent. You think about when people want to have kids, and a lot of my friends that don't have kids, we think about the day that the baby's born, or the day that we adopt that kid, if you go through adoption. But we don't think about the days where it's just hard, not because it's the kid is doing a tantrum, or because he's leaving for college, she's leaving for college, they're leaving for college, or anything like that, but because it's a mundane kind of thing, and it has changed your life forever. So I think that just the biggest thing that we can say to people, as in a podcast, I think, apart from just not why you get married, but to know that, like, that's what it entails when you start a journey with somebody, that entails having those mundane days with you as well, to think about this, because I do think about that, to think about those days. And if it, like the reason you want to marry this person, you want to have this partnership, life commitments, versus because even through those mundane days, even when you're quiet, looking out just to the ocean or to the desert, because I'm in Arizona, I don't know why I said ocean, just looking out there, you're okay with just being with that person, not saying a word, but you know that they're there with you and you're there for them.
I think that's very wise. I think you would agree, Nancy. There are just a lot of days where like nothing special is happening, nothing bad, but nothing good, and or especially nothing good. Well, I don't mean especially nothing good, but I think Diego is right that when you think about marriage ahead of time, when you think about having kids ahead of time, it's the great stuff. It's the moment of marriage or the moment of birth. It's the first birthday party or the first anniversary, and yeah, those vacations, and those things. You don't think about living with the person every single moment of every day necessarily. um Danielle does this little noise thing when she's thinking, and it's rather annoying over time. It's just like I'm gonna have to live with that for the rest of my life. And I know when she's thinking hard, she's making this annoying noise. And she doesn't even know it. I'm like, why do you make that sound? She's like, what noise? What sound? Um, but yeah, so what do you think, Nancy? Is that wise to be aware that the companionship journey is every single day and that it's pretty mundane most of the time? Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
How about now?
Good, you're good.
Okay. I agree wholeheartedly with Diego. Life has its ups and downs, and then it's just ordinaries. And I delight in those days too. I, I I'm just in a very, very happy, wonderful relationship that I wish all people could have. But we have had our ups and downs, and the good times and the bad times, and then the nothing times, and it's great. So I do believe it is what you make it. You have to work at it. It doesn't just happen. You both have to work at it, and sometimes you have to give in a little on your, one way or the other. It's a 50-50 proposition.
I hate that C word, compromise, but you are correct. You are correct.
No one likes it, but
Yeah, right.
it has to be.
Yeah, it has to be. So we are approaching the end of our time. I'd love to share a funny story about my almost first marriage. But let's end with that. So first, especially you, Nancy. I mean, you've been together what 46 years now. So um, any wisdom, any parting wisdom that we haven't already shared for a long, healthy marriage?
I guess one thing would be, do not look for perfection, because you and I are not perfect, and those we are married to are not perfect either.
I mean, speak for yourself, but I hear you.
No, I'm speaking for you also. Sorry, I'm speaking for all of us, but that is a biggie. The compromise. Do not ever go to sleep at night without a kiss. If you've had some kind of a disagreement, we have a sign right up over my bureau that says, "Always kiss me goodnight." It's very important. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but it's very important. Understanding that your spouse is not going to always have good days either. So maybe you have to be the one that's upbeat that day. But respect, patience, goes a long way to a lasting, loving relationship.
Awesome, thank you. So, you don't have the long experience, Diego, but do you have any parting wisdom you'd like to share?
Yeah, listen to those who have been married. No, seriously, I think
Yeah,
a lot of people, when it comes to relationships, um, we think that we are the exception to the rule, and we don't listen to people that have been gone through relationships or gone through marriage, and we're like, oh, that's not gonna be us. That's definitely not gonna be us, you know. That, oh, that's hard, no, but that's not us. And I think that one, it minimizes other people's experiences because obviously those people are the same as human as you, and it also puts you in a disadvantage of not learning from other people's um other people's lessons and journeys that could help you out. Like I just literally just wrote down everything that Nancy said on a little note, so I'll make sure to read those. And it's true, I think that obviously you can always take the good, leave the bad, always make your own, also your own wisdom. But if you just sit and listen to others, especially those that have gone through it, you can learn a lot from it.
yeah. So essentially, listen to Nancy, and yeah. No, I agree. I agree. Um, and so so thank you both for your time, for your wisdom and honesty. And I think for anyone who has been married for any bit of time and has realized that the expectations that we had, how great it's going to be, and realize how much work it is, realize how important it is to talk about what a faithful marriage might mean and might look like. So I hope you have a lot of listeners for this episode. Thank you both. I will end this with a short story. Kind of going back to what working out your theology before you get married as much as possible. I tried doing that, but I didn't do a great job. So I once read a book in college by C.S. Lewis that essentially argued that marriage is all about holiness. Like, who cares if you're attracted to the person or not? It's just all about holiness. So I thought, oh yeah, he's right. So I started dating someone who was super religious and that I was not attracted to at all. And I was so convinced by C.S. Lewis that I needed to marry this person that I bought a $4,000 engagement ring. I told people I was about to propose, and I realized each time I told this story that everyone else was super excited, and I was just kind of like, yeah, I'm gonna propose, and that decided it for me. Um, I shouldn't marry that person. I don't even know what happened to the ring. It's just $4,000 down the hole, essentially. But I realized marriage, for me at least, couldn't just be about holiness. Maybe it's because I was already super holy. I didn't need anybody's help. But either way, um, little funny story to end our time together. Again, thank you both so much for your wisdom. And all you listeners, if you have other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us and ask. Tell your friends about this podcast. Make sure you check in and tune in every time we post. Until then, keep it holy, friends.